The Center for Creative Leadership has studied what actually causes managers to fail, and they didn't land on giving bad feedback. They didn't land on conflict avoidance. They didn't land on time management. The most consistently flagged item that they found across every sector, every level, every industry, it's the mental switch. It's that identity shift. That's the moment you realize that the job you were hired to do is no longer the job you were promoted to do. And there's also research from Reverting from 2020 to 2025 that's tracking this same issue. And that issue is managers were promoted before they felt ready, and they weren't given any kind of framework to support them, with no framework for what that role actually requires now. That's what we're going to get into today. And I'm going to give you 2 things you can actually do about it and use today before the end of this video. Let's get into it. You were promoted because you were the best at doing your job, but now that's no longer your role. You were hired to do a specific job, and when you got promoted, that job changed. It changed along with the title that you were promoted into. The problem is no one told you that. No one told you it was going to change. There's 3 ways that this usually shows up. The first way this usually shows up is you revert to doing the job. You were a doer, you want to keep doing the job, or because, your name is on the project or whatever it is that you're doing, you don't want it to mess up. So you take over instead of letting the team that you've now been put in charge of do the job that they should be doing. The second one is that you maintain those peer level relationships. I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and they were given an example of they took a managerial job and they continued to go out to dinner afterwards, hang out outside of work hours with one particular person, even though there was more than one on their team. How do you think that made the other person feel? The one that wasn't getting invited. And whether they knew about it at first or not, you as the manager now are responsible for how that looks. That's on you. So you need to be aware, right? It's the mindset shift. You need to be aware of that. And then the third one is carrying kind of a double burden. In one hand, you're trying to prove that you deserve or deserved the promotion. And then the second half of that, in the other hand, is you're managing people now that potentially wanted that promotion, or maybe they felt they deserved it more so than you. So the reason that it's so hard is because it's not necessarily a skill gap, it's an identity gap. You have to change your mindset from being a doer, being an employee, a worker, to being a manager and a leader. You spent most of your time as an individual contributor and employee, and that was your identity, and that's how you were evaluated, was based on your output. Now it shifts. Now it's not your output, it's your team's output. Now your output is other people. And that metric really, it's not as clear. Here's the kicker with all of it, is that discomfort that you're sitting with of not doing is kind of exactly what your new role is. You're no longer the doer. You oversee, you manage, you lead, you encourage, you support. I want to talk a little more about the peer relationship trap. This one can really destroy credibility really fast. And how it shows up usually is that you are applying a standard to your friends that you're not applying across the team. You think that shows up as friendship, but it's actually corrosive. Every single exception you make gets noticed by everyone, even though you don't think it does. You don't necessarily have to blow up the relationship, but it does have to change, or at a minimum, there has to be some communication about what this looks like going forward, what it looks like in the work environment. I mentioned at the beginning we were going to talk about some takeaways that you could use today, this week, as soon as possible, however fast you want to implement it. The first one is I want you to redefine your success metric out loud. So you're going to write these down. The first one, in my old job, I was successful when blank. In this job, I'm successful when blank. Fill it in. Read both sentences. Read them out loud. If your answer to that second one still is referencing your output, you haven't made that mental shift yet. That mental shift only happens when you articulate that new job in concrete terms, not as a feeling, but as a measurable result. The second one is the consistency test. This one goes to the root cause of the peer or friend. So before any interaction this week that you have with a former peer, ask yourself one question. Would I do this the same way if it was someone I didn't know, not a friend? If the answer is no, that's your gap. You need to fill it. You need to adjust. Pick one standard, one expectation, and apply it identically this week. Not because you're being cold, because consistency is the only thing that makes the authority real. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you like and subscribe. I put out practical leadership advice like this every week. We'll see you in the next one.